Sometimes you look into an organization and its whole history is just completely tied up with one specific passion. It really shapes everything.
Absolutely. Like you might see a group start out broad, open to anything almost, but then narrow down to become the place for just one thing.
Exactly. And maybe that one thing, say a specific dog breed, had a tough time getting recognized, facing public perception issues right from the get-go.
It happens a lot, especially in the purebred dog world. Passionate people, they really drive the bus.
Yeah.
And the history often has these really key moments, these turning points.
Well, that's pretty much the story we're digging into today. We're doing a deep dive into the American Dog Breeders Association, the ADBA.
And for this, we're looking at the historical accounts provided by the ADBA itself. So it's their telling of their own story.
Right. And our mission here is to unpack the origins, how it evolved, its unique role, especially with the American Pit Bull Terrier. We want to pull out the really interesting bits.
Yeah, not just dates and names, but why it developed the way it did. What were the forces, the ideas behind it?
Okay, let's jump in. The sources say the ADBA kicked off way back, September 1909.
That's right. And here's maybe the first little surprise, considering where they are now. It actually started as a multiple breed association.
Multiple breeds, really?
Yeah, they called it an open registry. Basically, if you were a member in good standing, you could register, well, presumably different types of dogs initially.
Interesting. So who were the folks behind this, the founders?
The names mentioned are Mr. Guy McCord, who is president, and Con Feeley, a co-founder. And right away, the source highlights their big passion. Both were avid fanciers and breeders of the American Pit Bull Terrier.
Ah, okay. So even if it was technically multi-breed, the guys running the show were deep into APBTs.
Exactly. And here's where it gets even more focused. They were apparently close friends with Mr. John P. Colby, a huge name in the breed.
Colby, right. I know that name.
Well, the source actually calls Colby the mainstay of the ADBA. It was such a core connection that the ADBA even boasted about being the home registration office for Colby dogs specifically.
Wow, mainstay. And the home office for Colby dogs. So on paper, multi-breed, but in reality, very much rooted in the APBT and a specific line from day one.
Pretty much sets the direction, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, in those early days, open registry, low dues, just $2.50 a year. But the source makes it clear that focus just narrowed over time. It gradually became all about the American Pit Bull Terrier.
Makes sense. Follow the passion, right? Now, I read something fascinating in our sources about their early paperwork, something about a pink paper.
Yes, that's a really cool detail. The original registration paper, it was just one page printed on pink paper, and it basically functioned as like a title of ownership for the dog.
A pink title. Definitely stands out. What kind of info was on it?
So the top half had the dog's description, pertinent details. The bottom half listed the pedigree, the owner, and the breeder. Simple enough.
Okay. But you said there was something more.
Yeah, the really telling part is the message printed on the back of this pink paper.
Ah, the reverse side. This sounds like where we get the real flavor of the time, the context.
Totally. It tells you so much about their goals and the breed status. It can quote a bit from the source here. It said, the American Pit Bull Terrier is now recognized as a standard breed, where a few years ago it was unrecognized as a breed.
Unrecognized.
Mhm.
Just think about that starting point. They were literally fighting for basic acceptance as a distinct breed.
And they tackled the stereotypes head on. The message also said, the majority of the American public carried the impression that the American Pit Bull Terrier was synonymous with dogs used for fighting purposes only.
Right. The fighting dog image.
But then it adds, this idea has been dispelled by persistent efforts of the breeders who composed this association.
Wow. So right there on the ownership paper, they're making their case, pushing back against the negative perception. They're saying, that's not all this dog is.
Exactly, and showing progress, too. It mentions, presently, classes for American Pit Bull Terriers can be found at almost every local dog show being held.
Getting classes at local shows back then. For a breed with that kind of baggage, that must have felt huge. A step towards, legitimacy.
Big step. And they weren't thinking small. Their stated goal for the breed to be classed as the leading American dog.
Whoa. Okay. The leading American dog. From unrecognized to that. That's some serious ambition.
Shows incredible belief, right? They highlighted traits like loyalty, willingness to give his life if necessary in defense of his master-mistress, really emphasizing that protective, loyal nature.
So focusing on the positive traits they valued.
Yes. And it finishes with this call to action, asking the reader to unite with us in our efforts to bring this dog to the destiny he deserves. And the ultimate vision, the standard dog of the U.S.A.
The standard dog of the U.S.A.
That pink paper wasn't just admin. It was like their mission statement.
Yeah.
Challenges, efforts, huge goals. It really frames the whole ADBA identity around the APBT. It absolutely does. It locks it in early on.
So these founders, McCord and Feeley, they set this strong tone. How did things move on from them? Who took over?
Well, the first big transition noted in the source was in 1951. The ADBA passed to a Mr. Frank Ferris.
Oh, okay, Frank Ferris.
And interestingly, he ran the association with Florence Colby. That's the wife of the late John P. Colby.
No kidding. So that Colby connection, the mainstay thing, it carried right through that first leadership change. Very direct link.
Kept that continuity, yeah. The source mentions they ran it on a, quote, limited scale during their time, but the focus on the APCT exclusively just kept increasing. Ever-increasing emphasis is the phrase used.
Tightening that focus even more. Okay, and after Ferris.
The next handover was in 1973. Frank Ferris was retiring because of his age, and the ADBA was bought by Ralph Greenwood and his family.
Greenwood, got it. Was it just a business deal, or?
Seems like it was more within the community. The source notes the recommendation actually came from Howard Heinzel. Heinzel was a personal friend of Ferris, a big ADBA supporter, and someone who only registered his own dogs with the ADBA.
Ah, okay. So it feels like the torch being passed among people deeply invested in the ADBA and the breed itself, not just outsiders coming in.
That's the impression you get, definitely. Which leads us into the 1970s, and this seems like a really crucial period for the ADBA actually defining the breed standard.
Right, 1976 comes up as important in the source material. What was going on then?
Okay, so in 76, a group of APBT owners, described as having a very competitive spirit, came to the ADBA. They wanted confirmation shows, and for shows, you need a breed standard.
Makes sense. If you want to compete, you need rules, a blueprint.
Yeah.
But there was something specific about how they wanted this standard created, wasn't there? This feels like a key point about the ADBA.
It really is. The source is very explicit about this. They did not want a standard that was just copied from the UKC, the United Kennel Club, or the AKC, the American Kennel Club.
They deliberately chose not to just adopt what the bigger established registries are using. Why? What was their goal for their own standard?
They wanted a standard that reflected the actual dogs they owned and bred the dogs registered through the ADBA lineage. Their focus, according to the source, was on defining traits like intelligence, character, loyalty, and crucially, the athletic conformation that the breed was originally bred for hundreds of years ago.
Okay, athletic conformation tied to original purpose. So it wasn't just about looking good in a show ring in the conventional sense. It was about preserving a functional type linked to the breed's working history.
Exactly that. Preserving that heritage. That focus on historical function and the structure needed for it is really central to understanding the ADBA's approach. And this effort led to what they call the ADBA APBT Heritage Confirmation Standard.
Heritage, right there in the name, underscores the point. Did they start doing anything else around this time to promote this vision? Publications, maybe?
Yep. Right around the same time, they launched the American Pit Bull Terrier Gazette. First issue was August 1976.
The Gazette. What was its main purpose?
The stated aim was to enlighten the public to the truth about the APBT and promote the positive aspects of the breed. So again, that public perception piece, but also promotion.
And how did they promote the positive? Through the Gazette.
Through the Gazette, yeah, but also by highlighting their sanctioned events, confirmation shows judged by their standard, and also weight pulling events.
Ah, weight pulling. That fits perfectly with the athletic confirmation and historical work focus, doesn't it?
Right.
It directly showcases strength, drive, things tied to that heritage.
Precisely. It's a practical demonstration. The Gazette itself covered everything: history, pedigrees, ads for dogs, books, care, nutrition, training tips for their specific shows and polls. It also acted as a sounding board for the community. Really, it aimed to bring the breeds past and present together for readers.
Sounds like a vital tool for building and maintaining that distinct ADBA community and its specific vision for the breed. So fast forward to today. What's the ADBA's position now, according to the source?
Well, the American Dog Breeders Association, Inc., as it's formally known now, is still a major player. It's currently the largest registration office specifically for the American Pit Bull Terrier.
Largest for the APBT. That's significant, considering where they started. Still growing.
Apparently so. The source says it continues to grow both in the U.S. and internationally. And it makes a point that the ADBA-registered APBT is the #1 breed exhibited in their types of events, the confirmation shows, weight polls, and top dog athletic events they sanction.
So the community around their specific standard and events remains really active and is, in fact, number one within that sphere. Now, you mentioned it started multi-breed, then focused intensely on the APBT. Has that changed at all recently?
Yes, that's an interesting loop back. Since 2006, the ADBA has actually opened its registry to other purebred dogs once again.
Huh. So a return to the multi-breed structure, at least on paper, after decades of that very tight APBT focus.
An interesting turn, yeah. And the source also mentions their broader role today, positioning themselves as a leader in preserving the rights of dog owners and breeders in general.
What a fascinating trajectory. From that small group with a deep Colby connection through the Pink Paper Manifesto, focusing almost entirely on the ABBT, deliberately creating a unique heritage standard based on function, promoting it with specific events like weight polls, becoming the biggest registry for the breed, and now widening the scope again.
It really shows how a dedicated group can, carve out a niche, define a breed according to their own values, and build a lasting community around it. The influence of those passionate fanciers is undeniable.
Absolutely. And for you listening, think about what this tells us. How much can the initial passion of founders shape decades of an organization? What's the significance of defining a breed by its historical job versus maybe current show trends? How do specific events like weight polls reinforce a particular identity for a breed?
And maybe consider this final thought. That pink paper declared the ambition for the APBT to be the standard dog of the U.S.A. The ADBA pursued this not by fitting into existing roles, but by creating its own standard, emphasizing that historical athletic conformation and promoting it through events testing those abilities. What does it really signify for a breed's identity when its largest registry bases its standard and main competitive outlets on historical function, compared to registries perhaps more focused on aesthetics in a traditional show ring?